People think the most dangerous places are dark alleys, abandoned houses, or sketchy neighborhoods. They're wrong. The most dangerous places are the ones that feel peaceful, the ones where help is far away, the water is calm, and the trees are close enough to watch you breathe. I learned that lesson at a place called Daryl's Pond, a place that doesn't exist on any map, a place no one claims to own, and a place where, even now, I still wake up some nights convinced I hear a paddle scraping against the water outside my window. There used to be a pond about half a mile away from my old house, tucked deep enough into the woods that you couldn't see it unless you already knew it was there. No sign marked the trail. No fence blocked it off. No house sat nearby to claim it. It was just there. Everyone called it Daryl's Pond, though no one could ever tell me who Daryl was or why his name stuck. Some people said he drowned there years ago. Others said he owned land nearby and disappeared. Most folks just shrugged and changed the subject. That should have been my first warning. I went fishing there all the time, usually alone. I was 24, freshly moved back into the area, and desperate for quiet. The pond gave me that. The water was still, the trees wrapped around it like a wall, and the world felt paused whenever I paddled out onto it. I even had a system. Near the edge of the pond, I'd driven a thick wooden pole into the mud. I tied a rope to it with a loose noose, nothing morbid, just a way to secure my kayak so it wouldn't drift when I wasn't in it. I'd paddle out, drop a line, and float right in the middle where the fish always bit best. That afternoon started like every other. It was around 3 o'clock, sunlight filtering through the trees and broken beams, the air warm but not heavy. The kind of day that feels too nice for anything bad to happen. I paddled out to the sweet spot, dropped my line, and leaned back, letting the kayak rock gently beneath me. That's when I saw him. At first, it was just movement in my peripheral vision, branches shifting near the tree line on the far side of the pond. I figured it was a deer, maybe a hiker who didn't know the area well. Then a man stepped out of the trees. He stood there for a moment, half hidden by the brush, like he was checking to see if anyone noticed him. When he did, I lifted my hand and waved, offering a friendly smile. Out here, you didn't see people often, and when you did, it felt polite to acknowledge them. He waved back. Then he walked down to the water and climbed into a small, battered rowboat that had been tied near the shore. I hadn't noticed it before, which was strange. I've been fishing here long enough to recognize anything new. He picked up the oars and started rowing toward me. I told myself not to overthink it. It was a public pond, at least unofficially, and people came here sometimes. Still, as he got closer, something fell off. Not threatening, just wrong in a way I couldn't quite explain. When he was close enough that talking wouldn't require yelling, I smiled again. "Perfect day, isn't it?" I called. "Yes," he replied. "Absolutely." His voice was calm, too calm. And after that, he said nothing. He just kept rowing. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, and I felt that familiar social pressure, the urge to fill the gap, to keep things friendly. "So, you come out here to throw some lines?" I asked. "No," he said. "I don't actually fish." That answer caught me off guard. "Oh," I said, chuckling awkwardly. "Well, it's never a bad day to relax on the pond." He didn't respond. Instead, he rowed closer, so close that his boat drifted into mine with a solid thud, rocking my kayak and sending small ripples across the water. My stomach tightened. Careful there," I said, forcing a laugh. He didn't apologize. He didn't say anything at all. I told myself I wasn't scared, just weirded out. The guy looked like he was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. Scruffy beard, flannel shirt despite the warm weather. He wasn't giving off aggressive vibes, just invasive ones. I tried to focus on my line, pretending I was deeply invested in fishing, but by then the fish were the last thing on my mind. I could feel him looking at me. You know that sensation, the prickle at the back of your neck when someone's eyes are locked onto you? That was happening now. Slowly, carefully, I turned my head just enough to glance sideways. He was staring at me, not at the water, not at the trees, at me. I swallowed hard and decided to meet his gaze. Maybe if I showed confidence, he'd back off. We locked eyes. 1 second, 2, 3, 4. Finally, he looked away. My heart was pounding now. "So," I said, my voice a little tighter than before, "where are you from?" "Up there," he replied, lifting one hand and pointing behind himself toward the wooded hill and the dirt road beyond it. "Oh, you live by Suffolk?" I asked. No, I'm not," he said quickly. "What made you decide to come out here?" I asked. "Why not?" That was it. That was all I could get from him. He didn't fish, didn't relax, didn't talk. He just sat there, half smiling, watching me. By this point, my chest felt tight, like my lungs weren't pulling in enough air. We were surrounded by trees on all sides, floating in the middle of a pond with no one else around. No cell service, no easy escape. I decided to move closer to shore, slowly, casually, so it wouldn't look obvious. I dipped my paddle into the water and began rowing toward land, pretending I was just searching for a better fishing spot. The sound of his oars followed almost immediately. He was coming with me. "What great day, huh?" I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to keep it steady. He didn't answer. When I got close enough to the edge of the pond, I stopped paddling and turned to face him. "I think I'm going to call it a day," I said. "Head home." For the first time since we'd met, his expression changed. The smile vanished. "I can't let you leave," he said. Before my brain could fully process what he'd said, he lifted his flannel shirt. A handgun sat tucked into his jeans. Everything after that happened in a blur. I dove out of the kayak, splashing into the shallow water, and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't think. I just ran, through mud, through brush, through the half-mile stretch of woods separating the pond from my house. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. Branches whipped in my face. I burst through my front door, slammed it shut, and locked every lock I could reach. I pulled the blinds down, leaving only a thin crack so I could peek outside without being seen. I kept every light in the house off. As dusk settled in, my paranoia only grew. Every shadow outside looked like movement. Every sound made my heart jump. Eventually, I convinced myself he hadn't followed me. I made my second mistake then. I didn't call the police. I kept my bedroom windows open to air the room out. My bedroom was on the second floor, so I figured there was no way anyone could see in. About half an hour after I turned the light off and pulled the covers up, I heard it. Leaves crunching. Slow, deliberate footsteps outside. I sat up, frozen, listening. Normally, I'd assume it was a deer, maybe a bear, but not that night. The footsteps stopped. Then a voice drifted up from below my window. "Hey, buddy, you up there? Trying to sleep?" My blood turned to ice. "Sorry," the voice continued. "Didn't mean to wake you." It was him. I didn't make a sound. I slid out of bed, crept into the hallway, and moved down the stairs as quietly as I could. The second time I realized how thin the line is between kindness and catastrophe happened years before Daryl's Pond, back when I was still young enough to believe that bad things only happened to people who made bad choices. I was 17, still living at home, still convinced that adults automatically knew what they were doing simply because they were older than me. That illusion died somewhere out on the bay, surrounded by black water and drunk laughter, with nowhere to run. It started as a fishing trip. My brother-in-law, Jack, invited me to come along with him, my sister, and a couple of his friends for an overnight trip on his boat. Jack came for money, the kind of money where problems could be solved by throwing cash at them until they went away. Ever since my sister married him, her life had turned into one long vacation filled with expensive dinners, new cars, and weekend getaways. This was one of those getaways. I packed everything I thought I'd need into a small backpack, extra clothes, toiletries, a hoodie for the night air, and drove out to Jack's place on the wealthier side of town. His house sat right on the bay, the water practically licking the edge of his backyard. A neat wooden dock stretched out behind it, leading straight to his boat. The boat was massive, way bigger than anything I'd ever been on. Its name, Lexi, my sister's name, was painted elegantly across the side. Jack once told me he got the idea from Forrest Gump, laughing like it was the most charming thing in the world. To me, it just felt like another reminder that I didn't belong in his world. We set sail early in the morning. Jack had packed more food than we could possibly eat. Coolers stuffed with ice, bags of buns, stacks of hamburger patties. He even had a full barbecue grill installed on the boat, bolted down like it was a permanent fixture. "Gotta do it right," he'd said with a grin. A few hours into the trip, my excitement started to fade. Fishing was slow. Only one largemouth bass had been caught, and of course Jack was the one who reeled it in. His friends cracked open beers not long after we left the dock, and by midday they were already noticeably drunk. I asked my sister if I could have one. No, she snapped immediately. You're 17. She always did that, slipping into this parental tone whenever she felt like she needed control. It killed whatever fun I was trying to have. By late afternoon, I was questioning why I'd even agreed to come. The only part of the trip I enjoyed was lying out on the back deck, letting the sun bake my skin while I stared up at the sky. As the sun began to dip, the sky turned a deep orange, bleeding into pink and purple near the horizon. It was beautiful in a way that made you forget everything else. That's when Jack fired up the grill. I thought it was strange. We'd caught enough fish for dinner, but when he started flipping burgers, I didn't complain. Honestly, I preferred burgers anyway. By the time we finished eating, darkness had settled over the bay. There's something both peaceful and deeply unsettling about being in open water at night. The lights of the shore were distant pinpricks. Beyond that, there was nothing, just black water stretching endlessly in every direction. Without the boat, you'd be dead. Simple as that. Jack and his friends were completely hammered by now. Music blasted from the speakers. Laughter echoed across the water, and empty bottles clinked together as they stumbled around the deck. Eventually, they dragged me inside to play Cards Against Humanity. I didn't have much else to do, so I joined them. There was a beer sitting on the counter near the small bar. No one was paying attention. My sister was too drunk to nag me, so I grabbed it. By my third beer, I finally felt relaxed. The music had been turned down earlier because it was so loud I couldn't hear myself think. Jack and his buddies were incoherent now, slurring their words and laughing at jokes that didn't make sense. My sister was drunker than I'd ever seen her, though not as bad as them. Despite it all, I felt safe. We were adults, mostly on a boat, far from land and calm water. No cars, no strangers, no problems. That illusion shattered when I heard the voices. At first, I thought it was part of the music, but then one of Jack's friends tilted his head. "Do you hear that?" he asked. I turned the music off completely. "Help!" someone shouted from outside. "Please help us." We all rushed out onto the deck, or at least I did. The others stumbled. Over the side of the boat, barely visible in the darkness, was a much smaller vessel. Two men stood inside it, gripping the edges, looking up at us. They looked exhausted. "What's wrong?" I called down. One of them spoke. He said they were out of food and gas. Said they'd been drifting for hours and needed help. I felt a pit open in my stomach. I looked around at the others. Jack could barely stand upright. His friends were in no shape to make decisions. My sister looked at me, waiting. I realized, in that moment, that the responsibility had somehow landed on me. Jack told the men to wait while he went to grab the ladder. He tripped almost immediately, dropping his beer and swearing loudly. I helped him carry the ladder to the edge and hook it onto the railing. As the two men climbed aboard, they thanked us repeatedly. Jack and his friends tried to talk to them, but their words came out as drunken nonsense. I apologized, explaining that they'd had too much to drink. The men didn't react. They barely looked at me. Instead, they turned their attention to Jack. "Do you have food?" one of them asked. We led them inside. Jack grabbed the leftover burgers from the counter. The men devoured them like they hadn't eaten in days. Grease smeared their fingers. They didn't speak while they ate. Something about it made my skin crawl. When they finished, Jack handed them a jerrycan full of gasoline. They thanked us again and climbed back down the ladder into their boat. As they motored away, relief washed over me. I told myself I'd done the right thing. We all went to sleep soon after. Jack and my sister took the bedroom. I slept on the couch while Jack's two friends took the pull-out cot and another couch. The couch was rock hard. I tossed and turned for nearly an hour before giving up. I needed a drink and to use the bathroom. Jack had told us to pee in the ocean to conserve water. I opened the door to the deck, expecting nothing but the quiet splash of water against the hull. Instead, I heard it. A boat motor. Faint, but unmistakable. I froze, listening. The sound was coming from somewhere out there, hidden by the darkness. I climbed up to the control deck and flipped on the searchlight. The beam cut through the blackness. Nothing. I turned it 90 degrees. Nothing. 180. Nothing. Then, about 3/4 of the way around, the light landed on something. The boat. The same one. It was moving toward us. Before I could react, a scream ripped through the air from inside the cabin. A scream so raw it turned my stomach inside out. I jumped down and ran inside. One of Jack's friends was standing in the corner, pale and shaking. The other was sitting upright, eyes wide. They were standing over me, he said, his voice barely audible. Two figures, just standing there. Jack and my sister burst out of the bedroom. What the hell is going on? Jack slurred. They ran out, the guy continued. Out to the deck. We rushed outside. There was no one there. I pointed to where I'd seen the boat. The searchlight was still aimed in that direction, but the water was empty. The last time I ever went fishing with my grandfather was the day I stopped believing that everything in the water could be explained. I was 21 years old, and despite growing up around lakes, rivers, and ponds, I had somehow never gone fishing with him before. My grandfather was 84 then, old enough that most people assumed he'd slowed down, softened with age. They were wrong. He was the toughest man I'd ever known. He'd fished his entire life, and not casually either. Fishing wasn't a hobby to him. It was a discipline. He knew every knot, every lure, every subtle difference in water movement that told him whether fish were feeding or hiding. He spoke in terms I didn't understand, even on the car ride there, rattling off techniques and strategies like he was giving a lecture. I nodded along, pretending to understand, too embarrassed to ask him to slow down. We drove for over an hour, leaving the suburbs behind and heading deeper into a part of the state I'd never been to before. Cell service faded. Houses thinned out. The road narrowed. Eventually, he turned off onto a dirt trail. Then another. Then another. By the time we stopped, it felt like we were in the middle of nowhere. He parked his Jeep at the side of the trail and cut the engine. This is it, he said. I looked around, confused. There was no lake in sight, just trees. Dense forest stretching in every direction. Where's the water? I asked. He smiled faintly. That's why the fishing's good. From the back of the Jeep, we pulled out a small aluminum boat. It wasn't light. We each grabbed one end and started carrying it through the woods. At 84 years old, my grandfather didn't slow down once. My arms burned. Sweat dripped down my back. I wanted to ask for a break, but didn't. The thought of him outlasting me was humiliating. After what felt like forever, the trees finally opened up. The lake appeared suddenly, like it had been hidden on purpose. The water was dark, far darker than any lake I'd seen before. No reflections, no visible bottom near the shore. It looked deep, old. This place doesn't even have a name, I said. He nodded. That's how it stays good. We pushed the boat into the water and climbed in. He handed me a paddle and showed me how to move quietly, efficiently. Even the way he spoke was different now. Lower, more focused. Once we were far enough from shore, he showed me how to bait my hook and cast my line. And he stopped talking. Completely. At first, I thought he was just concentrating. I watched him from the corner of my eye as I fished, waiting for him to say something. Anything. Minutes passed. The forest was silent. No birds. No insects. I turned to ask him a question. He didn't respond. He was leaning forward, staring into the water. Grandpa, I said. Nothing. He leaned closer. A tight knot formed in my stomach. Something about the way he was positioned felt wrong. Too rigid, too focused. I turned back to the water, trying to ignore it. About 20 seconds later, curiosity got the better of me. I turned again. He was leaning even closer now, almost over the edge of the boat. I reached out and put my hand on his shoulder. That's when I heard the splash. It wasn't like a fish jumping. It was heavier, more deliberate. My grandfather jerked backward, his hands gripping the side of the boat. Then I saw his arms move. It looked like he was pushing something away. Paddle, he shouted suddenly. Now! The fear in his voice snapped me into action. I paddled as hard as I could, my heart pounding. I didn't know what had happened, but I knew it was bad. The boat rocked violently as I pulled through the water. Don't stop, he yelled. The moment the boat scraped dirt near the shore, he jumped out. He moved faster than I'd ever seen him move in my life. We didn't grab the boat. We didn't grab the gear. We ran. By the time we reached the Jeep, my lungs were on fire. He threw the boat door open, and we took off down the dirt trails, branches slapping against the sides of the vehicle. "What happened?" I screamed. "What did you see?" He didn't answer. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel. 10 minutes passed before he spoke. "I was looking into the water," he said slowly. "At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. Something moving beneath the surface. My mouth felt dry. It kept coming closer," he continued. "Closer to the top. The shape started to make sense." I stared at him. "I thought it was a reflection," he said. "But then I realized." He swallowed hard. "It had a face." My skin prickled. "A human face," he added. "Too clear. Too aware." He didn't say anything else after that. Weeks later, I pressed him again, asking him to explain. He struggled to put it into words, his hands trembling as he tried. "It reached out," he finally said. "Grabbed me. Not like an animal. Like it knew what it was doing." I asked